right, welcome back to another episode of the Construction Hall of Fame podcast. I am in for an exciting one today. I've been looking forward to this, like I just told Tony, for about 2 weeks. Today we have Tony Calvis with Calvis Wyant Luxury Homes out of Arizona. And Tony, first of all, thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for the invite.
Certainly. So just to kick things off like we always like to, would you mind giving our audience the story of really how you started out in your career and how you progressed to where you are today as the president of Calvis Wyant?
I would say my career has been sort of following the river of life. I'd like to think that I was a little more self-directed, but I just went with the flow. I had the opportunity to become a construction worker in my 20s, and I found it to be fascinating. I liked the mechanical aspect of it. I liked how tangible it was. You would start out in the morning and the lumber would all be laying on the ground, and by the end of the day, there would be a whole bunch of it up in the air. So you could really see the results of it. I enjoyed working with my hands. I love the outdoors. Being in the Phoenix, Arizona area, you gotta love the outdoors. I spent 8 years as a frame carpenter, which was, as I like to say, probably 6 years too long, because it is definitely a young man's occupation. I noticed one day that I felt very comfortable carrying 2 sheets of plywood, and the young guys were carrying 3. So I said, it's probably time to start thinking about another direction. Was fortunate enough, had some early mentors that helped me get my contracting license. And then this was back in about mid 80s, early 80s, before the savings and loan crisis back then, where a lot of developers in the Arizona and Phoenix, Scottsdale area also owned banks. And so it was very convenient. So if you're a young carpenter, if you're a young builder starting out, they would fund you their bank back home. And my first job was one where it was in Montana. The bank was in Montana, and the developers were from Montana, and they owned a subdivision that I wanted to live in. So they made me the loan, built the first house, absolutely loved the experience, and just kind of went from there. Long answer, Matt.
No, not a long answer. I'd actually like to dive more into that. So what was the process like going from more of the field to running your own business? How was that learning curve? How did you increase your skills as a business owner and eventually as a leader? What did that process look like?
I think I love to say again that I love to say that it was more self-directed and intentional, but I'd always enjoyed working with people. It's sort of a trite thing to say, but I just knew early on. I'd worked my way through a few years of college as selling in a retail setting. Always had odd jobs, something to do with some sort of sales process. So one thing I really loved about the business, and this helped me greatly, is that I love being around construction workers. They're a fascinating bunch. They're usually just great guys. Although I have to admit that in the early 80s, it was a rougher crowd. The people in construction these days are family folks and trying to make an honest living. And you don't see back then you saw a lot more drug use and things you don't want to see in a group of tradesmen. But again, it was a fascinating bunch of folks. I hadn't been exposed to them growing up, and I just came to love it. So people knew that I loved the construction workers. The construction workers, would want to cooperate with me as the superintendent or the owner of the company, whatever. So it was just sort of natural. Made a few mistakes, of course, but early on, I knew that I had to rely on the team building the house. So first thing, and I teach my superintendents this today, the first thing you do when you get out of the truck is you go ask everybody how they're doing. Chances are that you're going to know something about them because they've been on our other jobs. Ask them how the family is. If you know the dog's name, that's great. Take an interest in them. They're going to take an interest in you. And you will always, the first thing you do is that when you're hitting the job in the morning, you go around to everybody and that you didn't see the night before and make sure that they didn't see anything you ought to know about. So, I can't tell you how often you'd hear a drywall guy, if you just ask him to say, you know what, yeah, I put a nail in over in bedroom 4 in that east wall, and it felt a little spongy. I don't know if I hit something or not. I didn't see any water. Well, you can go check that out. Uh, and, uh, and we have a culture where we try to work with trusted trades uh, in over and over again. And because everyone is familiar with each other, likes each other, they'll help each other too. So they'll let you know if something's wrong, so you can fix it before it becomes a problem.
Mm.
But anyway, so I wish I could say it was a process, but I think it's kind of a natural bent that I had.
Mhm.
And so, and to this day, I'm pretty enthusiastic about it.
Mm. Sounds like you also learn from experience as well, which from what I found is one of the most valuable ways to learn. It's like reading something in a book is fine, and maybe hearing something in an audiobook is fine, but actually doing it and putting it into practice, really in so many aspects, has been a huge differentiator for me. So that's very interesting. For your first house that you built, or your first couple houses, I mean, I don't know the capital situation going into it, but building a full team of superintendent, project manager, other folks to help lead that project, I would assume would have been a big capital outlay when you first started building. Did you start as the turnkey project manager and you picked some really good subcontractors you worked with on these first couple homes and then built the team after that? Or what did that beginning phase look like?
It was, again, it was a different time. So, like I say, early mid 80s, I developed all these friendships with all the different subs that were working on the projects I was familiar with. I had a superintendent, buddy of mine that kind of helped me with his list of people. And the business back then was so much less sophisticated. I mean, there were no cell phones. That came the next few years. But when you started out, you had a pager. That's the best you could do. And so, I started out with a group of subcontractors that were doing production homes, and the custom homes, quote unquote, that I was doing weren't that much different than the production homes, frankly. And that base of trades became, our first group. Because of the easy financing, you didn't need a whole bunch of capital. I had the very good fortune of I married well. My wife kept working. Um, I kept working as a framer, so I did the job of the rest of the guys and worked for 4 to 6 hours, and then try to complete some assembly or some part of the project so it wasn't hard for somebody else to pick up after me. And then I would take off and, maybe grab a shower and go play general contractor. Um, Started out doing specs because of the easy financing at the time. And that was, and did a couple. And then I got my first build to suit because that's how you get business by being active. People will find you, and if they like what you're doing, they'll hire you. So I spent a lot of Sunday mornings. I realized early on that Sunday after church was a great crowd, and it was a good time for me to be out there with that push broom, cleaning the place up. People would just stop by. I'd wave if they slowed down. I'd lure them in, and so that's how we got the business started.
So interesting. There's always these unique stories I come across about unique business development strategies or ways that companies found a niche and built out within a niche of these relationships of people who referred them to people they did great work for. And then sometimes you just find it takes this snowball effect. So Very interesting finding the church crowd after Sunday church.
Yeah, yeah. So, oh, don't worry. I cleaned up a lot of Saturdays too, but it was pretty reliable. The neighborhoods I was working in, that if I was there on Sunday, there's usually somebody looking around. And back then, you didn't have the internet, so that's how you found a place to build a house, is you drove around. Uh,
Mm,
your realtor, if you were using one, would get a big fat book every week on a Friday with all the new listings.
mm.
It was a different time.
Right, right. So to dive a bit further, there are certainly levels to building homes or different types of home building. And then within the niche of custom home building, there are different levels to the types of custom homes that are built. You refer to what you build as art level homes, which I think is such an interesting way to think about these beautiful, intricate properties that are being built at the high level of residential building. So what do you think it is? I mean, you touched on referrals, relationships, but what do you think has allowed your firm to go from where you started out to now building homes in some of the most prestigious neighborhoods within your market? I mean, what do you think contributed to that ultimately?
Well, I think that obviously you start out doing a great job in one niche, and just as you continue to keep working in that niche, you take every opportunity to keep doing something new. So it's you just you do a good job, and well, I think as I think about that question you just asked, homes have become so much more sophisticated. It didn't happen overnight, but every year things are a little bit newer and more sophisticated. What we used to call custom homes in the early '80s and mid '80s, and even the '90s, were not much more than they weren't much different than a production home down the street in a tract subdivision. So as the homes become more sophisticated, we have to become more sophisticated. It's just a natural progression. The business evolved at the same time that we were taking on more and more. Now, one thing that was a distinct difference with us is that I met Gary Wyant early on, and Gary is the architectural half of Calvis Wyant Luxury Homes, and that was just my great fortune, and I hope his too. We've worked together for 35 years, and it's been a wonderful partnership. And designing the homes and building them is even more gratifying than just seeing those sticks go up in the air. But today, the kinds of houses we're doing, we're working in a section of the town of Paradise Valley, so basically the east side of the Phoenix metro area, uh, anywhere from Paradise Valley into Scottsdale is our niche. So that's sort of a long north-south corridor. And the town has grown quite a bit. Phoenix is, I don't know what we are, 5 million now, maybe more. So it's a big place now. So we just kind of stay in that area. We do a lot of work in luxury golf course communities with very rigorous CCNRs, design guidelines. So the homes are just they're just incredible. They've become art pieces, and the customers are truly creating works of art, and it's a real goal for them.
Hmm. To dive in a little bit further to that partnership that you decided to go into with Gary, picking a partner is very important in business, right? Like the partner will ultimately be a big determining factor in the outcome of the business in many respects. Or, things go well, things don't go well, you never know, right? But, it sounds like you got it right the first time, just like you got your marriage right the first time. It sounds like you might have a good gut on these things. But other than gut, what went into assessing going into this partnership with Gary?
I think no, no, that was truly the grace of God there. Gary was working for a production home builder at the time and moonlighting on the side, doing plans for anyone he could. I think he had the third kid on the way, and so we're both young guys starting out, and just hustling. But Gary has a unique ability uh, to bring a practicality to the floor plan design and that still drives a beautiful elevation. The key to one of the many keys to this business is you got to remember that somebody's going to live there on average 5 or 7 years. So if we build their dream home, I think that our mission, as I think we have a responsibility to the families we serve, to create something that someone else will want to live in later, even though it was perfect for their family. So you have to figure out how to accommodate lifestyles so that, as we like to say, it's easy for the realtor to list and sell it in 5 years. And that's our joke. If we do a lot of work with the real estate community, and oftentimes the realtor will be sitting in this room with us with his clients, and I'll always whip out that one liner: we've got to make this easy for so and so to sell in 5 years. It's all about him. But if we do our jobs right, it will be a great listing later, and we have to do that because these are very expensive homes, and nobody likes to burn equity building something dumb that no one else will buy. So, hope I drift a lot, but I hope I answered your question on that.
Nailed it. Nailed it. You touched on something earlier. Show interest in others, and then in turn, oftentimes you'll find they'll show interest in you in return. It's like the saying: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So going back onto leadership and leadership philosophy, what would you say are your foundational principles, or your way of thinking around leadership in terms of dealing with both employee satisfaction and making sure that your employees are happy, while you're holding obviously or standards of accountability for the team as well. And then also you touched a bit on emotional intelligence, so I'm curious how that plays into it.
I, I'm a, I spent, if it's interesting, the kinds of motivational books and the things I'm interested in, or I was particularly interested in that earlier part of my life was back then. Earl Nightingale was actually still alive and making cassette tape recordings. So I had just dozens of tape series. Brian Tracy still producing things. There was a lot of these self-help speakers and educators that taught me a lot. So, the classics, I like the classics from, the 40s and 50s, Og Mandino, anything that he wrote. I'm generally, it's gone on my bookshelf and then been given away to somebody else over the years. But you've got to, if you're going to lead people, I think that I'm lucky in that I don't have to think about leading them too much. I treat them as equals, and we have a fairly flat organization here. There's 20 of us, and we're at the point now where we're codifying a lot of things. There's things going into manuals now that have just always been culture and lore and in our heads. We're big checklist people, so we don't forget things, but we're actually growing up and going to the manual stage finally. But the leadership is a two-part deal. You've got to have that love for your people, and the second thing, in that respect, but the second thing you've got to have is you got to have people that don't need too much leading, if I can put it that way. So I think that if someone we've been fortunate and people stay here a long time, we try to pay a little bit better than average. And we certainly, there's a lot of respect. And the funny thing is that I see younger companies that are doing all this team building stuff, and where they're really trying to give everyone this life outside of their life. And I look at our group, and we already have lives, and we already could be, most of the people here could be self-employed doing what they do very easily. They're sharp, but it's just easier for all of us to do this together than it is to do it apart. Yeah, and I think they watch I think they watched my beard go gray, and they decided, maybe we'll leave Tony do that part. We'll just work here.
Right. So it sounds like in terms of accountability, you've, if I'm just making a couple assumptions, you've set clear expectations of what greatness looks like, and your team doesn't need to be told multiple times in most cases what greatness needs to look like. You've brought on competent individuals who can do the job, and they're also bought into doing it your way. So that naturally requires less leadership and oversight than it may if people weren't bought in or they didn't do it the right way or they needed to be told things multiple times. Is that expectation setting? Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I think the sort of how you couched it just now probably gives me too much credit. I'm not really. I don't see. I know that it's in fashion and to. I think it's important in any organization. Yeah, the leader's got to lead, but we have a very benevolent dictatorship, if you will. Yeah, everything's my fault, and everything, may percolate to that level. If there's a problem or some good stuff happens, people will assume I had a lot to do with it. But actually, it's just this huge team effort. Again, picking good people, and I think too that some companies, I've just had a very favorable hand. There's a lot of luck involved in this. In 2008, everybody went, very good companies went down everywhere in the United States. Uh, but we survived it, and staff saw what I was doing, and they're all taking pay cuts, and I said I'm going first, I'm going to zero, but we got through it. So there's been that shared experience too with a lot of the people here that have been here that long. But so yeah, I hate to take much credit. It's just sort of evolved. If there's any credit, it's that you got to have everybody here's got patience, and it's good to have a short memory. Because things go wrong. We all have bad days, and but don't dwell on those. Let's dwell on all the positive stuff.
Right. You brought up something else that was interesting. I actually read a blog, I believe, about this the other day, but essentially the topic of creating that out of work experience for employees. I've seen a fair handful of people online talk to folks who really wouldn't mind as much for the whole barbecue after work every Friday type of idea. They'd rather go home to their family, like you said, and live their life outside of work. And so it sounds like you've built a culture of people who appreciate that. Like you said, they have things that they're already focused on outside of work. And then for some people, maybe they thrive in an environment where there's Friday barbecues, right? So that's the nice thing about the construction industry. To each their own. There's different types of companies, different types of cultures for different types of individuals, right? But I am curious from a personal development perspective. I know you were big into personal development coming up through your youth, and I'm curious. Do you have anything for your team in terms of personal development? Is that a thought process for you, or is that something you leave up to them if they want to pursue the personal development route?
I think there's nothing formal. It's there's some. Um, I think the culture, especially with all the social media being thrown at us today, I think you get to this point where you just feel like you have to be a superstar at everything. But there's an awful lot of good people. I use my father-in-law for example. Rest his soul. I had the great fortune to marry his daughter and get to know him and his wife. So my in-laws are just salt of the earth. He put 10 kids through 12 years of Catholic school on a factory rat's salary, and it wasn't like a skilled position. He was, more at the lower labor end in that factory. Worked there his 30 years. Got to enjoy some of his retirement years. That's great, but he just kept his head down, and that's all he wanted to do because it was more important than when he got off his shift. He would he would go spend time with his kids. He'd have the rest of that afternoon to be with his family. and volunteer at the school. Volunteer at the Catholic school that actually I went to, as well as all of his kids. He was one of our gym teachers back when President Kennedy decided that every school was going to have a physical fitness program. So the point I want to make here, and I've been taking too long to make it, Matt, forgive me, is that not everybody wants to be this, leader and wants to be, and wants to get a high stress job where it just consumes them. So yeah, this is, as in any business, you're going to get consumed if you're self-employed. So certainly I've been that way. And hopefully I've learned along the way to have that integration. I don't think that balance is the right word anymore, but at least that integration of work-life. Especially now, I think the culture is so much driven by achievement. We all want to be like the people we see online, and they're not real. I'm sure they're all very nice people in their own ways, but we just can't do it. It's a production. So I don't think that. I think that just puts so much pressure on us. And the people we have around here are pretty grounded, if I can say that, and that's what we're looking for.
You never know what goes on behind the scenes of social media.
Yeah, and there's got to be a makeup crew.
Right. Yeah, great point. And so earlier you touched on the evolution of how custom homes have evolved. And prior to this recording, we had also talked about how critical planning is when you're building these park-level homes. Can you expand a bit on how that looks presently with these high-level homes you're building?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank God we have the software now that really helps the job. So you've got to take. Well, starting with the design side, there's going to be a dozen consultants along with the architect, and we work with outside architects too. But what we find is that in this market, and for the kind of houses we're building, it gets to be very architect driven rather than builder driven, and that's okay. But what's usually lacking is no one's really getting paid to coordinate all these people and make sure that that 50, 60 pages of plans in a typical custom home in Scottsdale, no one's really being paid to make sure that as that roll of plans has come together digitally with input from a dozen different consultants over a period of a year, no one's getting paid to vet all that to make sure that there's no conflicts, so that, for example, the retaining wall heights jive with the grading plan, and that jives with the landscape plan, and the piping for the French drains behind the retaining walls is shown on the detail. That detail is noted on the plan for the plumber, so he knows what he's putting in. There's just a whole bunch of ways. We're a whole bunch of ways for the design to not be all coordinated. Now, typically, there's a lot of good builders in this town and around the country. I've met a bunch of them, and they're good at problem solving. If you're going to be a builder, you got to be able to problem solve and think on the fly a little bit. But that doesn't mean I like it. I hate thinking on the fly. So that's just kind of our attitude around here, is that we are going to accept the position of being the scribe that keeps all these guys, that vets the plan so thoroughly, so that everyone that has had input over that year into those 50 or 60 pages, all their work product is coordinated so it jives with each other. Now, if we do that, what happens is that, number one, the consultants, the civil engineer, structural engineer, mechanical, plumbing, and electrical, everybody's happy about that because if you show them, at least in our experience, if you show them, hey, look, this doesn't quite jive with page 3 over here, this detail D2, um, which way do you want it? They say, oh yeah, sorry, yeah, well, let us get that fixed. Because they know that's one less trip to the job they've got to make later when they're not going to get paid for it. So it's to everyone's benefit to clean it up. Now, once we get that thoroughly vetted set of plans, I noticed over my shoulder, you can see one of those rolls back there is printed on green paper. That's the first thing we learned is that, not the first thing, it took us a couple of years to figure that out. Print the final plan on a different set, on a different color paper, so that when a guy shows up, when a subcontractor shows up on the job, and he's got a set of plans printed on white paper, whoa, stop, wait a minute, that wasn't the final set. Let's go swap out the green one. But it's all about coordinating that, because what we have to do is that set of plans becomes a marching order for hundreds of people and thousands of parts. And we're building something that's a very emotional, a very important purchase. If we're building an Amazon warehouse, hey, if the thing doesn't leak and the floor doesn't crack and everybody's happy, but it's a much higher standard when it comes to your own home. Now, in the building process, that's where our checklists and our systems come into play, just right along with the ones that happen in our design process. But if you don't have this attitude about this, we're going to figure everything out, then before we start, then you're never going to minimize. You're always going to have something you missed because we're human, but we want to minimize that and shave months off the project and just and not waste brain cells. Matt, I'm sure you've, as you talk to other guests, you've probably heard stories about how, people can just get burned out on a house or any project because it's problematic. And that's where so let's not make this hard. I'd rather delay it a month and shave 3 months on the back end.
Right. Yeah.
I'll take a breath now. That was a long answer again. Sorry.
No, we're all getting value from this. I'm sure the audience is definitely appreciating it. So no worries at all. That's what this is for. We're here to talk, right? But actually, what I want to dive a little further into on the design side is you had mentioned that early on in your time building the company, you were an early adopter of design build in the Arizona market. What did that look like? And early on in the process, how have you seen that evolve?
Well, as you can tell, my nature is I want to fix it and get it all perfect before we start. And the only way you can really build a house efficiently, where everybody's coming in, doing their job, enjoying their work, and then leaving. Okay, to go on to the next one. Get them in, get them out. It's sort of like a Chinese restaurant. Is what my analogy is that. The only way to do that is have great instructions. So you got to have good plans. So that was a driver for me. So I met Gary, and how I met Gary was that as a carpenter, I had the opportunity to work on several projects where his old boss, that firm, had been the architect on the project, and I always admired those plans because they were easy to read. The line weights were varied, so your eye would just pick it up. So many plans to this day, there's a bit of an art to creating something with a whole bunch of information, drawings and squiggles and lines on it, and making it readable so you pick up what's what. Is that an object line, or is that the outside of the stucco, or is that the framing line, or whatever? They should all be different line weights. So Gary was really good at presenting the information, and he just had this natural sense for room proportions and just making things look right. So I was hooked. I knew that that's what I had to do. So Gary's old boss told me, look, you can't afford me because you're a young cub builder, but there's this guy I know that used to work for me, and always looking for a little side work, and so that's how we met. But so anyway, so the design build for us, that started that way, and there wasn't anybody doing it back then because it was just an extra piece of overhead to have a design department, if you will. Now the reality is that I was the construction department, Gary was the architecture department, and that's in the early couple of years, my wife answered the phone, so because we didn't have cell phones or computers.
So from that moment moving forward, once you brought Gary on as a partner, there was zero outsourcing of design. It was all done in-house from there.
Initially, yes. Now, and then as we've gone along, we had the opportunity to work with other talented architectural firms in the city. And one thing about Scottsdale, Arizona, it is a great place to be a custom home builder and to build your custom home. Everything. It's as sophisticated and with great showrooms for all the different things that go into a custom home. It's as good as anywhere in the country. I was in a Builder 20 club for a few years, and that's a very good thing. Recommend it to any builder, where you get to see what people are doing in other places. Real helpful. I learned a lot, and one of the things I learned is that no matter where I went, it was San Francisco or it was Southern California. There's some other cool things happening. Florida for sure, but we're as good as any of them. It's a fun place to work, and we have a lot of talented people here. So a very creative environment.
Right. So diving a little bit further into what the experience is like building these homes with typically, I'm assuming, high net worth or very interesting types of individuals that can be involved on the client side, high level architects. Your team is in this case high level architect and design team. So for someone who's considering either going design build or considering stepping up into the next level of project, what has that experience been like, and maybe what are some things they might want to consider before they take that route?
I think that that's a great question. As far as how to step into that role, as far as working with a higher end client, a higher end architectural firm, did I get your question right there?
Right. If they're considering doing that, what would be some considerations?
Well, the bond between the architect and the customer has got to be really tight, and generally is. I think that you have to figure out, at least for us, every architectural firm and every architect has their own style of just managing how they put their docs together, how they like their meetings to run. And so I think that it's important to keep some humility and realize that, okay, yeah, it'll be your problem as a builder to make sure it doesn't leak, it's straight, square, plumb, level, and true, and it doesn't fall down the hill, etc. The basics. But especially here, it heats and cools well. But it's your job to support that architectural and design team. Now, another thing too in this market is that first of all, if you want to get in that niche for a builder to do that, I think you've got to form the relationships, obviously, with the architects. So, going to the sorts of places and doing the sorts of things that the architectural community have exposure to. You've got to do that stuff. And then equal to the architect, okay, I should say equal. The interior designers don't have to worry about structural problems, but without a good interior designer on the team, you're doomed. You've got to have someone to do that too, because there's such an overwhelming amount of choices now that it's not like when we started 35 years ago, where you just sent somebody over to the tile showroom and they sort of picked out what they wanted in bath two. It's not that way anymore. We have everything on earth available to us. The internet screwed that process up.
So many options.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. And yeah, so, and a good designer working with a good architect that collaboration is going to create something that, you know, is unique and it's beautiful and it's functional and it's long lasting. So, again, I'm a big fan of the architectural community around here. We're working with them more and more, especially as you know, we're trying to shift to do more of that kind of work. As Gary is, you know, Gary and I are, you know, retirement age really. We're both pretty vital and both want to work, but you know, that may not be up to us at some point. Yeah, the younger guys here are trying to edge us out. So,
Right. So how are you working with other architecture firms, being that you have an in-house team? What does that relationship look like?
um, it's pretty natural. I think the architectural firms appreciate that we're not we know the process well. We know the challenges they have. We know that, you know, it's hard to make money in architecture. You know, we can prove that. Got plenty of experience in not making money at it. But we can support them, and and they know once they work with us on the first project, they know that we're really going to help coordinate everything and reduce the RFIs that they're going to get during construction. Because our goal is to figure it out in the air conditioning rather than in 110-degree heat. We want to identify any potential, you know, just open items. I mean, not necessarily mistakes. It's just open items. Gee, we can do it like this. We can do it like that. Let's figure out which is better right now and clean that aspect of the plan up. So if we figure out ahead of time that if there's an AC system that has to fit into the attic space over the garage for one of the units or over the kitchen area or over the key drop or whatever, and we can tell from the framing that it's going to be tight, we want the input from the mechanical contractor about specifications. We want to get him to focus and review on it, not just bid the thing. Say, okay, the unit goes in there, this costs X. Okay, next item. Wait a minute, let's vet the plan too, so that when we get there, you know, we don't have this, you know, very difficult to solve problem. So the architects like that because we're not constantly asking them for requests for information. We're not pointing fingers at them. Oh, they blew this. I think in the typical builder-architect relationship, you can have a little bit of finger pointing, and that doesn't work. You've got to have the attitude that we're going to just all help each other and support each other, and we do. And the first part of that's doing it while we're all on paper before we get out in the field. So yeah, it's been good. Admittedly, I guess in a way we're competition, but we're only doing a few projects a year. Our architectural department, we've kept it small. It was a lot bigger before because we are shifting our focus to doing more architecture, outside architecturally driven homes. Yeah, so yeah, it's a natural progression. We're trying to leave the company so that it has that option once Gary finally retires, and you know, once I finally retire.
Very interesting. I've spoken with other firms who are, have their own in-house design team, and there's some competition with architects, but they still have found ways to collaborate. To your point, I mean, there is still a ton of business that you could give other architects with these houses that you're building because you're just building a few a year. So there is, there might be, perceived competition, but at the end of the day, there's also mutual benefit to that relationship, it sounds like. So, and then on top of that, you do have your in-house design team still on projects. So there's that collaboration. It sounds like you believe you can maximize the client experience as well as the architecture firm's experience through that. So that's huge.
Another thing that we're going to start doing is that if we've ever got a slot, it's all about the timing. We're all trying to fill our work schedules and get the homes, get the homes in the ground as efficiently as we can. But We also have the ability to do our own construction drawings. So sometimes we might work with an architectural firm to do the design, take it through schematic design and design development, and take it to the point that it's ready for construction docs. And our team can come in and do that. And a lot of architectural firms would love that because everyone's swamped here. So if we can take some load off of them, that's a big selling feature.
There we go. Okay. So can we dive into your maintenance business a bit? It's interesting. I was talking with another contractor a week before we had touched base about the podcast, and he was talking all about how he had started this maintenance business. It was helping his company. They were successful, profitable. Their clients were loving it. But at the same token, you and I had talked about how not, I would say not the minority of contractors and in this custom home space actually have a built out maintenance program or department within their company. Can you just talk a little bit about your maintenance department and how that came to be and what it looks like now?
Sure. We've been in business so long. I think we've got something like, I don't know, 400 or so houses. I've never been one to count up the years and the houses and all that, but just looking back and taking just taking a quick look at things, we've got about 400 houses that we've built over these years. And as I said earlier, the houses have become so sophisticated, and with all of the systems and all the things that are possible, and they're wonderful to live in, but these systems require maintenance. Everything requires maintenance. And it's just, our customers are demanding it, sort of homes we're building. Typically, they're second homes, or if anyone is building a house with us, probably they travel in the summer, so they're not here. They might go back to Chicago or Seattle or whatever, but or maybe that's when their vacations are. So someone's got to watch the house to make sure everything everything's functioning right and there's no issues. And also someone's got to take care of all the maintenance. Our folks generally, some of our customers are really handy and they want to change their own furnace filters. But it gets harder and harder to keep up with everything that's involved with these houses. So our maintenance program, our touchpoint maintenance division, we do that. We manage the homes. We take care of managing all of the regular maintenance. We keep the pool blue, the grass green. We keep the pack rats out of the barbecue when they're gone. We're starting cars because they're leaving a car here or two. So we're starting the cars for them and maybe just moving them in and out of the driveway to rotate the tires. A lot of folks will fly private out of Scottsdale Air Park. So, we're happy to do some sort of concierge butler type things. We're happy they'll drive their car there, leave it there at the airport, and just say, hey guys, will you pick it up for me later? Absolutely. So people, especially nowadays, there's all kinds of service apps that'll bring your groceries to you. So we're not filling up the refrigerator with beer like we might have been a few years ago, but anything to do with the house, they've got a point of contact. Oftentimes, their home control systems for everything, for heating, cooling, all the tech in the house. It'll be on a Savant system, for example. We'll have the codes, and our guys will have it on their iPads, so they're watching things. If the burglar alarm goes off, then our guys are on that list. They take care of it. So somebody's back in Chicago, they're not worried about it. So it's a really handy thing. From a builder standpoint, you got to do it. I think you have to do it in this price range if you're going to be a build-to-suit, ongoing building company. If you're going to build the occasional spec, then that's no problem. You can just refer us. We're happy to take that work on. But if you're going to be in this business serving people, that's just part of what they need. they didn't sell their business and retire here after 30 years to get a part-time job maintaining this house. That wasn't the goal. They want to play golf.
White glove level service right there.
Yeah, and what we do too is that we become pretty important to the folks. We've got great guys that are on that team, and they're trustworthy, and you can call them. It's going to get taken care of. And, if they're ever in a jam for something, we never say no. We're happy to help. So, yeah. Now, if you're the occasional spec builder, I think you can just, if you're just a guy that's sort of developing, you maybe hire a small builder to develop your project for you on this lot. You can get away with not doing it because you're not worried about getting all those referrals and the ongoing maintenance. But from a builder standpoint, a real builder where you're in this as a career for the long haul, if nothing else, you might keep someone with less knowledge out of that house, alarming your owner when they see something that needs a correction or whatever. Because sometimes there'll be something that it can look alarming, but it's not. It's not a big deal. So if somebody sees a termite tube on the side of the house, it can send some of our customers into a tizzy if it's presented wrong. And if it's in Arizona, you're going to have termites somewhere. But that's just one of the many things that needs to be maintained.
Right, right. So it sounds like what you're doing is you're providing a service for your customers that really significantly makes their life better. And on top of building their property, you're helping maintain the property from a really holistic perspective. So being that you're doing this, oftentimes when I've heard about maintenance programs, I've heard about some that were more profitable than others. With that said, I have heard pretty consistently that they do generate a good amount of additional business through referrals, keeping that relationship intact. How have you found, and actually taking a step back, it's kind of like my belief about how doing great, positive things in life for other people without having necessarily an expectation in return. Example, let's just say you run a maintenance department within your company that isn't all that profitable. It's not your cash cow for the company, but at the end of the day, you're providing a great service to somebody, you're giving in advance. And then it just so happens that oftentimes when you give, people want to give back in occasion. So have you found that to be the case, or how has that helped contribute to business?
Well, I just love the way you presented. I wish you were presenting this instead of me. No, of course. For us, what we found is that the competition for competition for any sort of home management or concierge service is going to be a retired guy that's in the neighborhood and says, hey, Fred, I'll wash your house. Give me $25. I'll walk through it once a week and just see if it looks okay. And so that's sort of the competition. So we can't really make. I've found that we don't really make a lot of money on. We don't make any money on just the whole maintenance part of it. It's a little bit of a labor of love, and it's like you said, we're serving these people that gave us millions of dollars to build a home. So, but absolutely, Matt, we get tons of referrals, and when something's needed, then we're there. So the real reason, from a builder standpoint, if you're just looking at it from a business standpoint, you need to have that service because it will generate the more revenue with remodeling and referrals. So yeah, worrying about a termite tube that shows up on the outside of a house after a rain, if you're getting the renewals done every year and getting it retreated every year like you're supposed to, you don't have that problem. So yeah, that's one thing that you avoid. But from a business standpoint, you're going to get a lot of referrals. And we find our customers too, they're creative people. They like to do things. They like to do projects around the house too. So, 5 years down the road, they might want to remodel one of the bathrooms, or and things wear out. We just need to be there for them.
Interesting. It's so similar, or it's so interesting how similar to me seems to be throughout different types of construction. My dad's in the window and door space, like home renovation space. He's part owner and VP of a company called California Deluxe Windows. And when they had actually done and implemented a maintenance program, they saw a big uptick in referrals as well. So it also like forces you almost to keep that positive relationship and keep that ongoing touch point in a positive way with clients. And naturally, if you're mind and you've been doing a great job, telling a friend or a colleague sometimes isn't the worst thing to help them, find a good contractor or find a good home builder, right? So very interesting. But I guess to as we wind down, I mean, you've spent 3+ decades in the construction industry, and you have been proven to be a great leader, building great projects, and you've built something many, most, if not all people I know would be proud of. And so that's obviously commendable. But I'm curious, what have been your biggest learning lessons over your years in the industry?
Oh boy. Well, again, you're being very gracious. I just hesitate every time somebody says, tell me what you built or whatever. It's been a team here. Everyone's had their role. Everyone here has decided to let their teammates take their piece of it, and they collectively have let me sweat it out for, okay, let's make payroll every week somehow. But the lessons I've learned are, boy, you can get pretty far in life caring about other people and trying to, just applying the golden rule. There's a whole bunch of really lofty things, I guess, that people say about leadership. As much as I love listening to Simon Sinek, and I love what the guy says about leadership. I find I'm not one of those people that thinks about it in that direct sense. It just sort of happens. And one skill that I think I've had that I've developed is apologize fast. Everybody screws up. Everybody has a bad day. If you screw it up, own it quick. And just say, go beg forgiveness because we're all human. Um, uh, do things with checklists because it's so. As soon as you start thinking that you're going to do everything out of your head, that's when this is no. Pilots don't do things out of their heads; they use checklists. Except when our door falls off, it's not like Boeing losing one. So, so had a customer say the other day, "I'll be out there, but I got to find a flight that's not a Max 9." I think there's a certain amount of humility uh, that's necessary to dealing with everyone, um, and and I think everyone around here, the egos are pretty small, and and that's a big thing. We're all in it together. So we look for those kinds of people because they wear well over time, and that's what this group is. You definitely, I think that I'm always big on reminding everyone that contractors make contracts. Those are promises. Let's be very specific about what we put in our agreements, and let's be very thorough about writing everything up. So one of the things that we've done, I don't know it so much as it gets into leadership as it does self-preservation, is that we will write up extensive job scopes that turn into a specification addendum that gets attached to the contract as part of the agreement. So the same document that tells your dad what windows are going in where and how far back the reveal is from face of stucco and how they're to be mounted. And that document, yeah, some of it's on the plans, but it's elaborated further with these scopes of work to the various trades. That's what we do. We have to put everything in writing so that everyone can figure out what they're doing without stress. Um, and when you blow it, apologize fast. That's one thing. I think that if you're able to show your customer that you're trying really, really hard to get everything just so. They'll give you a lot of grace if you miss something. That's, but the customer needs to know that you have their back. And if you have a human error moment, then, we smile, we fix it real fast and go on. And always remember, this is one of the most expensive purchases our clients will ever make. I talk a little bit around here about it's a bit of a sacred trust. We're not their doctor, but we get to know our folks really, really well, and their lives are enhanced by what we do, and we have to remember how important that is all the time. So, hey, do we joke around and have a good time? Yeah, but all of us here are easygoing personalities where we can have fun at our work, but not take away a bit from the seriousness of what we do. So that's just part of the recipe there. But anyway, that's a little bit about what makes us tick here.
Certainly. It's so interesting when I talk to successful construction leaders about how they got to where they are today. So much of it typically comes back to people in some way or another, whether it be empowering your people, like you touched on systems and processes. Some people might hear systems and processes and think, oh, that's operations. But really what it is as a leader, empowering your people with the systems they need to be successful based on organization standards and uphold that level of client service and just full delivery throughout the process. And then you touched on your humility. I think it's so interesting because as I've talked to you, as we've got to know each other, humility is something about you that I've perceived about you in our communications. I mean, you're constantly putting it back to the team. You're telling me that I'm maybe being a bit flattering, if you will. But at the end of the day, I do think a lot of what you've talked about comes back to people, treatment of people, empowerment of people, because at the end of the day, you're not in your position. You're not an owner builder. You're not the sole practitioner of your company. There are 20 individuals on your team who will touch each client, who will touch each other team member. So by treating those people as you obviously have, building what you've built, to empower them to become successful and help you and help themselves at the same time, mutually beneficial relationships. It's great to hear that this common thread of treating people well has contributed across the board to growing successful companies.
I don't know how you get through life otherwise. Like I say, nobody bats 1,000, so God knows I make mistakes. But yeah, no, it's a very complicated business too. So you have to always remember that when you're dealing with folks, because there's just so much going on. It's not rocket science, but it is complicated because of all the humans and all of the complexity of the structures involved. So yeah, no, it's but yeah, and I didn't say you were flattering. I just said you were gracious.
Right. Okay, so as we wind down, I just wanted to give you the chance to maybe spotlight any initiatives or upcoming fun projects or really anything at Calvis Wyant that you'd like to shine a light on here.
I think our shift has been it's been fun working with the outside design professionals. As far as the architects. Now, for many years, we've just made a rule: we won't take a project if there's not an interior designer on board. So that's just something that we're just used to. We're just used to doing that, but shifting more to the outside architects and getting more of that creative, just a whole other set of ideas has been fun for us. We're going to, I think I'm pretty bullish, so we're going to try to start ramping up more specs. We have 3 right now that we're doing, 2 in the master plan golf community, 1 in Paradise Valley, and then along with our usual build-a-suit and remodeling business. But we're going to do. I think we're going to do more specs. I'm just pretty bullish on. It's a great place to live. So just keep doing what we're doing has been fun, and we have a lot of fun. I don't know that my social media presence is exactly zero. I don't know that it's aspirational for us to want to do that, but but it just takes so much work, and I'm always afraid that if we take our eye off of what we're doing, off the ball. I've seen other companies where they get so marketing driven with all this stuff that, meanwhile, in the field, you lose focus on it. So I just find I'm limited that way. I can only do so many things. But uh, I think just the fact that we have this great business atmosphere, great climate. Everybody's discovered Arizona and they're coming here. So it's fun business. It's a lot of fun, and it's very fulfilling work, and we're going to just keep on doing that. Now, as far as where next year's Christmas party is going to be, I don't know. We haven't thought that out yet, but we might come up with a few new activities for that.
To be determined.
Yeah, to be determined, right?
Well, I mean, really great time spent with you today. I appreciate you joining me, Tony. I think there's so many valuable pieces as a construction leader, as a construction employee that you could take from this episode, implement in your career, and see growth. So I just want to thank you again for joining me on the show today, Tony.
Oh man, thank you. No, I learned a lot listening to some of your other podcasts. So thanks for the opportunity to be on this one.
Certainly. Our pleasure.